Awesome. So good morning, everyone. I'm Chairman Paul Yellow. I'm going to call the meeting to order and turn it over to Jordan Chandler to do the determination of a quorum.
From Spotsylvania County, Mr. Chair Paul Yellow.
Present.
Mr. Rodney White.
Rodney.
He's online.
Yep.
Present.
Mr. Jacob Hack. Mr. Mohammed Benamar. From the City of Fredericksburg, Jamie Jackson. Present. Mr. Bassam Amin.
Present.
Mr. Mike Craig. Now on the line. From Stafford County, Mr. Alice Oziak.
Here.
Mr. Brandon Brown.
Here.
Mr. Brian Council. From King George County, Mr. Nick Miner. Ms. Kimberly Wilson. From Caroline County, Mr. Mike Fincham and Mr. Craig Pennington. From Federal Highways, Ivan Rucker. From Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, Ms. Michelle Shropshire.
Online, present.
Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ponticello. Mr. Dan Grinnell. From the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, DRPT, Ms. Sierra Williams. Mr. Todd Horsley. From the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Dr. Bob Schneider.
Here remotely.
Mr. Joe Stainsby. From the Virginia Railway Express, VRE, Ms. Christine Hefner. Mr. Nick Ruiz.
Present.
From Fred Regional Transit, both representatives are unable to attend. And from GW Ride Connect, Ms. Kate Gibson.
Here, remotely.
Ms. Fleet Anderson. Roll call has been conducted and a quorum is present.
Great. The next item on the agenda is number 3, the approval of the January 10th agenda for today. It's an action item. Does anyone have any comments or changes on the agenda?
So just for those folks who received their agendas on email, the second revised agenda is the correct one. The agenda itself didn't change. We just had some of the documents where we needed to remedy one or two things. So the attachments changed, but the agenda didn't actually change.
Any other comments or discussion? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. The next item is the approval of the December 7th TAC meeting minutes. This is also an action item. Did anyone have any comments or questions on the minutes?
All right. Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next item is number 5, review of the November 15th, 2021 Policy Committee meeting.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We don't do a presentation. I just asked Matthew if he can pull up on the screen the actual Policy Committee agenda for you to look at. So we had the recommendations of the Lafayette Boulevard Highway Study. The Policy Committee heard the presentation. They did not decide to endorse it. They just noted the study. The LRTP update, it's very old news, and you will get some much newer news in the meeting today. The letter to the Secretary of Transportation, the board is happy with the letter, but they asked that we defer sending it out until the new governor is in place. The new governor may elect to change the Secretary of Transportation and appoint a new one, so we've delayed sending that letter. Public involvement summary, Stacey Fines, who was at the time our public engagement staff member, she did just a summary of what has happened in the past. The CMAC and SCGB project selection update, well, you know all about that, and we just gave them a very brief update on where the process is. The public comment period for the TIP, those were largely, you know, in fact, Jordan, so long ago that we had this policy committee meeting, it feels like it was last year. And can you just tell us what the TIP amendments were? I've forgotten.
Those are the amendments for the two smart scale projects that was advancing in an advanced schedule, and then the TAC in December approved the resolution. So those you also know about, thank you. Then there was a discussion about changing the makeup of FAMPO in terms of the counties that might be part of FAMPO and adding additional members, and followed by a discussion on possibly amending the FAMPO bylaws. No decisions were taken on any of that. This is just further discussion later. And that's all that was on the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ian? Okay, moving along to public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak either in person or online? Matthew, just for the record, are any members of the public online?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll continue moving on. We're down to number 7A, the University of Virginia Center of Transportation Studies, CTS, presentation on basically road safety, the Road Safety Champion Program with Matthew Bradley. Good morning, Mr. Bradley.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Joining me this morning is our program manager for the Safety Circuit Rider program at the University of Virginia. I am the LTAP director here at the University of Virginia Center for Transportation Studies, and thank you for the invitation. Joining me is Walt Catlett, who is our program manager for the Safety Circuit Rider program, and we would like to tell you a little bit about our Road Safety Champion program. So I'll hand it over to Walt.
Hey, thanks, Matthew. So I'm just going to walk through a handful of slides, and we'll navigate it quite efficiently. It sounds like, from what I've heard so far, that is the order of business. If there's any questions at the end, by all means, I'll be ready to answer them. Next slide, please. So the Road Safety Champion Program, University of Virginia was asked to pilot that program by the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Two key personnel are responsible for that: Jamie Sullivan at the National Center and Beth O'Donnell, who was here with the University of Virginia. Another key player is, of course, at the time was Becky Golden, who was a safety circuit rider, and she may be in y'all's room this morning. But she was a key player as well in this past year in helping pilot that program. And it can't go without being said, Matthew Bradley as well was right there as a program manager making all that happen. All right, you see right there before you 14 half-day training classes. We delivered the Road Safety Champion program pretty much virtually. We had a couple of classes that were in person, crash data analysis and combating roadway departures are two of those that were, I guess you say, those were full day classes. And then we had some others that were in person, OSHA 10 and plans reading type topics. Next slide, please. The way the Road Safety Champion program is set up, it's a certificate program put together by, as I said before, by the National Rural Road Safety, and it consists of a core module, topics, and then 4, you could say, disciplines. And you can see that before you on the slide: law enforcement, maintenance and construction, planning and engineering, and public health. I'm going to dig into that just a little bit more. But as I said before, it's a certificate program designed to improve the safety training of those responsible for operating, maintaining, designing, and enforcing local roads. Next slide, please. Here are the 7, we call them modules for the core modules. So everyone has to take this training. in order to become certified as a road safety champion. And you can see those 7 topics. Next slide, please. And then here's our career focused pathways for maintenance and construction, planning and engineering, public health, and law enforcement. The content for the first 2 are we deployed those last year, or we delivered them. And then public health and law enforcement is still under development by the Rural Road Safety Center. So you can see right there under maintenance and construction, some of the topics: maintaining a safer roadway, work zone. We lean on VDOT's BWZ class training for that. Worker safety, TIMS, take action now, maintaining safety. We deliver OSHA 10, and then flagger certification falls up under basic work zone training. Next slide, please. Now, the key players of our Road Safety Champion program currently are, I'm the program manager. Alexis Galozin is our project manager for Road Safety Champion program. She's also our program manager for online training. So she's a key player in the delivery of this course. Robin Carpenter, of course, has been our program manager for Virginia LTAP for years, and Matthew is the director. Next slide, please. One of the key elements of our program, not just for Road Safety Champion, but for Virginia LTAP, is having a level of consistency as it pertains to making sure our curriculum is consistent. You might say is branded, but I wouldn't go that far. It's just to make sure it's good quality material and it's similar throughout. And we utilize a design consultant for that, and you can see some of the benefits of it. We believe strongly that this has improved our the delivery of our content quite a bit. Next slide, please. All right, so this past year, here's what we've accomplished. We've offered all 19 Road Safety Champion classes. We've had 445 attendees this past year, delivered over 2,400 training hours, and we currently have 4 certified Road Safety Champions, which isn't a big number when you look at the number of attendees, but there's quite a bit of content here, and it's very exciting to have 4 certified Road Safety Champions. And I will share with you a key. The other been a couple of people from this group who've attended it. Brandon Brown is a key player. As a matter of fact, him and a few other people from Stafford County have been attending the classes, attending the training, I guess you'd say. And Stafford County embraced the Road Safety Champion program initially when it rolled out, and that was exciting for us at the university. I will tell you, the Rural Road Safety Center was extremely motivated to have their first 4 certified road safety champions, and so thanks for individuals like Brandon and for agencies like Stafford County to make that happen. But one of our road safety champions is from Spotsylvania, Lauren Cato, and then the other 3 are from around the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. All right, just like Virginia LTAP, our Road Safety Champion program, its primary customer, I guess you'd say, is local government. And you can see here from this pie chart, 85% of our students, participants, come from local government, and about 5% from VDOT, and then 6% from really from consultants who support both those local agencies and the state. Next slide, please. I think you can click it again. Yeah, there we go. So marketing is a big issue with our training. As I'm sure everyone in this boardroom recognizes, outreach is key, and making sure outreach hits the right target audience is important. And so we developed this little technique trying to catch people's attention and make it simple for people to register. You can see here, if you're a Road Safety Champion candidate, the cost to attend the training is free. And then you can see the cost for the other categories as well in the bottom left-hand corner. So this was our flyer for Systemic Safety Project Selection Tool. Next slide, please. Reading the roadway. It's a team of us who sit down and kind of pick pick these things apart and finally come up with what we believe will catch people's attention. This one, and a lot of times there's disagreement. This one, there was no disagreement. This one really caught everyone's attention, and so that's what we utilize. You see the training goes from 12:45 to 5 o'clock. So it's always on Monday. It lasts 4 hours. It's although it's virtual, I will argue it's quite collaborative. And by the end of the 4 hours of training, you'll have learned more with this delivery method than you would 4 hours sitting in a classroom where people were just presenting to you. Next slide, please. Besides the half-day virtual, we also deliver OSHA 10. And here's a flyer we created that was meant to highlight fall hazards. Clearly, we got something going on along those lines here. OSHA 10 is one of our in-person. We've delivered it twice. And here's the one we did. Here's the flyer we used for Virginia Beach that we delivered. So it's part of the program. Next slide, please. And then here's our worker safety class, which is a full day online. So it's an 8-hour class, but also follows the model of the half-day class where we have Zoom sessions where we discuss content, and then they have independent study time as we move along. Next slide, please. And then as you saw from previous slides, we have core modules, and then we have discipline related topics. And here's our flyer from the very first class, which is core module 1, Introduction to Road Safety. That one certainly would catch all of our attention when we're talking road safety. Next slide, please. All right, so the training, just as I mentioned a few moments ago about it being virtual, some might wonder how engaging it can be. I will tell you the comments from our course surveys support the concept that it is effective training they are learning. And here's one of those bullet comments. Well, not bullet comments, but a survey comment. Next slide, please. And the knowledge of the instructors and the videos definitely helped with my learning experience. So the ability of the instructor to engage the students in the classroom, and typically we have about 10 to 12 people in our classroom. And I guess you'd say a key attribute is our ability to flip the classroom. So instead of someone like me talking for 30 minutes and putting everyone to sleep, we engage all the students, and we help them. We tee it up for them so they can help teach each other. It's quite engaging and very beneficial, and this is a key comment supporting that. Next slide, please. All right, and then we mentioned our project manager is Alexis, and she is really, between her and I, we're reaching out to local agencies and promoting the program, and then we get to spend about 3-4 months with them as we navigate the training. And it's a great opportunity to get to know some people around the Commonwealth, and that this past year certainly demonstrated that. Next slide, please. All right, and there's our contact information, scr@virginia.edu. You shoot an email there and you can get in touch with Matthew or myself. So with that, we certainly thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. We know you have a busy agenda today, but if you have any questions, Matthew and I are here to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for the UVA presenters?
Just a question from me, Mr. Chairman. Is there something that you would like us as FAMPO to do as a result of the work that you're doing?
Well, the biggest, thanks for that question. The biggest thing for us is just making people aware of this program and the benefits that it can provide for all of us are quite substantial. Anytime we can improve the roadway safety, anytime we can help local agencies do that, through training, which is what this does. That would be for me, that would be helping us raise awareness about it to your constituents. Matthew, what would you add?
I just agree that letting the localities, the constituents know that this program is out there and it's available to them for free if they sign up as candidates. And if they don't want to sign up as a candidate, it's a nominal cost. So it's another resource, another tool in the toolbox available to local agencies and localities.
Thanks for that question.
Great. We have all of the localities in FAMPO here today. We also have our rural localities, which are not in the meeting today, on the DWRC side of the house. But we will certainly be able to send your presentation to all of our localities and encouraging them to contact you. And I think the rest have heard you today as well, so thanks for that.
That's perfect.
And I just have a quick question. Go ahead.
Is this class a one-time class, or is going to be a recertification, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we just delivered our first round of Road Safety Champion. And so we just started the next round. We taught our first class last Monday. We're teaching our second class of the 19 today. So I guess you'd say it's back out there to start all over. Recertification, I'm not familiar when that's required. I don't think it is, but that's a great question, and I'll provide some feedback. I'll reach out to the National Rural Road Center and make sure I'm right on that. But I don't think there's recertification. It would just be coming back and doing the training again to be refreshed.
That is my understanding, Walt.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess I had just a quick question for Stafford. Like, when did you take the training? Was it in person or virtual? And basically, what were some of the improvements that were made basically to Stafford as a result of the training?
Sure. I'll kind of let Brandon answer that since he's attended most of the training himself there.
Yeah, no, it's just virtual. Alex has been able to pop in here and there with some specific topics, but our two project managers who handle the local project delivery element in collaboration with VDOT have also participated significantly. Great for them within the context of project delivery. But we didn't been able to work with originally was one of their direct connections, which was, as a matter of fact, the young lady sitting at the table, sitting right here beside us, and we were able to look comprehensively across the county. We extrapolated our top 10 most significant roads that were or at least had identified roadway departure incidents. We were then able to strategically, engage those roads and look at what kind of crash modification factors might exist, whether that be signage or any of the other, applications to improve safety. So, Pennsylvania could easily do the same. The city could do the same. For folks who are just involved in general with transportation and on the planning end, it's a great opportunity for them to kind of be exposed to the breadth and depth of the safety subject on its own. So again, we were able to produce a lot of road safety analyses, site-specific enhancement opportunities, and the systemic approach, which is constantly reiterated through the program, which is how to comprehensively address safety, in particular in the context of rural roads, which is our domain here in the FAMPO. So thanks for asking that question.
That sounds great. Yes.
I guess I had one other comment to add to Brandon's. The Road Safety Champion program fits nicely under the umbrella of our Safety Circuit Rider program, which Brandon is talking about some of the products of that Becky worked on when she was a Safety Circuit Rider. This coming year, VDOT has expanded the breadth. He uses a good one, the breadth and depth of what will be offered along the lines of technical assistance. So we're going to be able to offer a much broader list of services to local agencies along the lines of improving roadway safety. And he touched on systemic countermeasures, also crash data analysis, but other things, local road safety plans, assessing segments of roadway for specific issues that might need to be addressed. And so we are that conduit through which VDOT will help supply those services at no cost. And so if there's a local agency whose staff needs a little bit of I guess you'd say, enabling that staff who doesn't have some of the skill sets that are necessary to do that, VDOT has set us up to target those type agencies. So reach out to us and we'll help with that.
Mr. Chair, folks keep referring to the young lady in the room, and I just asked Becky Golden if she could stand up and if we could just introduce her. For those of you who don't know Becky, she has joined the FAMPO staff from the beginning of January this year to replace, she'll be taking over some of the work that Adam was doing. And we just want to welcome her and introduce her to you. Becky is a staff member of Spotsylvania County. She's worked on this particular project at UVA. She worked further out west. And Becky, just great to have you. Welcome to FAMPO, welcome to the staff team, and welcome to the TAC. So,
before she speaks, can she move over? They won't be able to see her. FYI, you may just want to do
there you go.
Yeah.
There she is. Hey, Becky.
Hi, Walt.
Thank you. I was intending to keep your introduction for the staff report. They keep referring to you, so I just...
Welcome. Glad to have you. When was your first day?
Last Monday.
Okay. Wow, okay.
As the snowstorm hit.
Okay.
Easy first day then.
Yeah. Once I got back home. Oh, you came here on Monday? I got as far as the Thornburg exit and came around Route 1 and safely got back to my house. And Ian called to check on me about 8:15. So. You were a trooper. I would have been like, no. I could have been more. Well, welcome.
Becky is a resident of Caroline County. So I think we basically have staff members now that live in all of our jurisdictions.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks.
Sounds great. Any other comments kind of on 7A? Right, we'll move on to 7B, the CMAQ and STBG project selection process with myself. And the first item is, I guess, the proposed FY 23 to 28 schedule with available funding and modified call for project allocations. I guess was one of those staff present this.
So Jordan and I have been working on this together, and Jordan, I think, will make a couple of introductory comments, and I'm here to handle it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so first we're going to go through the schedule. We sort of talked about a modified option A and option B to have sort of an option C to look at a modified call for projects, and the conditions and applicants of that we'll discuss later on at the end of this presentation. So this is just sort of a modified schedule to accommodate both A and B that we had discussed previously. So then on the next slide, we have the introduction to the funding. So this is sort of updated from last time. It's the same concept. And then on the next slide, we also have a chart breakdown by fiscal year. So we got some information from VDOT about the previous and leftover funds that are available from all the other projects that are currently on the list. So we have the updated figures. We still have the HIP funding, which must be obligated by 2024. We have reserve funding in fiscal FY22 for STBG, and then we're still working out with VDOT for CMAQ. And then we have the holding from that we saw last year in the call for projects. We still want to maintain that 5% of the total budget so that we have that reserve in case costs increase and those changes occur. So we have, without that 5%, this is what would be available on the second line of the FY27 holding. We have the FY28, and this is an assumption. We don't have the figures from VDOT. They still are working that out, but CTDB just produced a slideshow that is on their agenda that said for the state over the FY22 to 27 for STBG, they have $137.5 million increase, which then needs to be broken down by MPOs and jurisdictions. And then for CMAQ, they have $37.5 million increase. So we still don't know the exact proportion of those funds, but that's sort of the general idea of what we have for those.
Yeah, Jordan, so just a general question, and this is maybe a question for VDOT as well. So based on what we know today, are we pretty sure that the CMAQ and SCBG kind of funding amounts are not going to decrease?
Yeah, I think that's safe.
Yeah, they'll at least stay the same?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and so with the sums of the figures above and then also the previous leftover are included, the SCBG and HIP is over $2.6 million, and then CMAQ is over $2.7 million, with the assumption of the FY28 funds. This is the next slide.
Assuming we get that money, so it sounds like we will.
So this is a breakdown by fiscal year. So some of the UPCs you see on here are from projects that are no longer continuing or projects that have concluded. So by each fiscal year and by each funding source, they're broken down. So we don't necessarily have to go through this. This is just sort of for information, but that's, again, how we got to those funding numbers.
There are just, if I can, before you move off of this, just to highlight, Jordan has spent quite a lot of time, I've spent quite a lot of time working with Susan at VDOT and others to try to clarify this. And there are still two things we're not 100% sure of. The $75,000 the leftover funds from the Lafayette Boulevard study, we think as FAMPO staff that there was actually an additional $50,000, but Susan believes that there isn't, so we're still trying to resolve that. So this $583.97, that is the minimum that will be available. It could increase if we find the discrepancy, and the real issue is around, there was initially a resolution to spend to allocate $250,000 to the Lafayette study, but actually programmed in the, what is that system called at VDOT? Cardinal is showing 200 was shifted. So we're not sure what happened to the other 50. It may have been reallocated somewhere else, or it may be put in a holding account somewhere. We're trying to resolve that with Susan and with our records. Remember, our resolutions decide things, but then VDOT has to action them, and we're just checking that the correct thing was actioned at the correct time. So the 75 is the minimum. We all agree that that money is available and it is left over from this project. We are unsure whether in the 50 might or might not be available. We'll have to resolve that with Susan.
So just a general question on the previous FY27 funding. I mean, it looks like there's just really not that much funding to allocate for that time frame. And I guess based on what we know today, we're not anticipating that that's going to change a whole lot, right?
Right. With what we know, the 2.5-ish million for SCBG and HIP and the 2.7 million-ish for MAC is all we know.
Yeah. And I guess I did have a question for Kate Gibson, if she's on the line. And Kate, I want to say I'm really sorry that you're sick and hope that you feel better very soon.
Thank you. Yes, I am here.
Yeah, the question is if there have been any recent updates on that kind of that potential swap with the 5307 and the CMAQ funding.
So we're still working with PRTC. There's kind of two parallel tracks happening at the same time. One is to actually figure out the administration of funding that has been previously allocated, and then at the same time trying to figure out all of the requirements to make sure that we can successfully allocate funding to the Brook project, or at least recommend that the GRC board make that allocation. So we're kind of working through both of those things. We have regular calls with PRTC. I don't have any updates right now as far as, being able to say that we've solved everything. It's kind of a slow moving process, but we are continuing to work on it.
So I guess my question is based on what we know today, do we think it's realistic that that could happen in the next couple months and that funding might be available to FAMPO to allocate? Or is that just not realistic?
I think it's possible. I don't want to say that it absolutely will happen. I will say, you know, even within the last month, a lot more has moved forward than had moved forward in the last 6 months. So, you know, we're making progress, but I can't say for sure what the timeline is going to look at. We are hoping to be able to, you know, reallocate that money in conjunction with this process so that you all can reallocate those funds, you know, kind of all at the same time. But, you know, my understanding from FAMPO staff is that this could always be done later, you know, kind of off cycle, basically. The other piece here is that I believe around April of this year is when we'll have our next allocation of 5307 funding. So there's actually, you know, every year more funding becoming available. So it's kind of a, you know, ever-evolving process, but, you know, again, hoping to target being able to make that allocation within the next couple of months so that you all can reallocate those funds as a part of this process. But if not, I think there will be opportunities in the future to do that.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thanks for the update.
So the key is for May, we do need to have the final list of approved allocations for the SIP. So that's deadline. So everything has to be, that we want to change has to be included before May. Otherwise, it'll go into next year and it'll just be parked if we can't get it done before then.
So if there's any more questions, so these are the call for project parameters that we're discussing based on like the schedule options. So again, staff is still recommending that we do not allocate the FY28 funds. We don't know the exact amount, and that's going to be changing, and that we set aside and hold them for what we did with the last year's funds that we didn't allocate to keep for the 24-29 call for projects. We have a bigger budget to allocate when we do the complete process and have the budget numbers. And what we're proposing to do is allocate all the money in the leftover and previous, the FY22 reserve, the HIP funds, and FY27 held dollars in sort of a manner that's amenable to the committee. So we don't have an exact option of how to do that, but we thought maybe if we ask VDOT which project timeline is advancing the at first and which project has a deficit, to fill that first, because that's the most urgent need. We also thought maybe the jurisdictions and agencies can provide a project that's on the list currently that has a deficit, and then we could fund through that means. So without the FY28 funds, there's a little less than $1 million in HIP and SDBG funds, and a little bit more than $50,000 for the CMAQ fund. So you can see, again, back on slide 5 with the chart of where those funds are coming from and how much there is in which fiscal year.
Hey, Jordan, just a question with that. So do those figures include the contingency, or has the contingency been taken out? And then there's also the money for the FAMPO studies. Is that has that been taken out of these totals, or is that kind of with the total amount of funding?
So the 5% contingency for all the funds has been removed from those totals, and this is what all those values are that we know of or assume at this moment. So we're not including things like the swap of the CMAQ 5307, things like that. We're not including, but what we've worked with from VDOT to accumulate. So these numbers would be what we have available, and that is not regarding the studies and the regional projects that we'll talk about later.
So in other words, that amount at the bottom, those two amounts at the bottom of that slide include all the leftover and remainder funds from existing studies.
Correct, with nothing set aside for the...
Nothing set aside except for the 5% reserve.
So the East-West study and the VCR kind of study they would take away from the 992?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then on the last slide is proposals that we've had from you guys from a call for projects of allocating the near-term years for only active transportation and the outer years for roadway transit TDM, and then on the other alternatives that we can propose to make it comparable to call for projects or use the staff recommendation.
And I guess just one last question, like is there any possibility based on what we know today that the funding levels for CMAQ and STBG would go up significantly as a result of the federal transportation bill that basically was passed few months ago, or is it basically just too soon to know that, and maybe it will not impact the budgets for this kind of go-around?
So I had a very quick look at the CTV agenda this morning, so don't shoot me if it's not accurate, but it looks like there is a small increase in both CMAC and SUGB. However, we only know the statewide totals. We don't know the breakdown for FAMPO, and so we would need further advice from VDOT as to what the detail is of that. So it looks like across the state, those two funds both go up somewhat. Not like, 1,000% or anything, but they do go up from what we were expecting. The exact amounts for us, Susan will have to send us an email at some point saying.
As soon as I get that email, I usually forward it straight over to you. But at this point, I have not gotten numbers.
I assume after the CTB votes, we will then get a
If we get it this early, I would be surprised. We normally don't get it until March.
Okay.
So it's looking like we're not going to have very much funding to potentially allocate other than maybe FY28. And if we don't allocate the FY28, we're talking less than $1.5 million for CMAC and SCBG.
Yeah, that's the situation. The FY28 funds, I think, would be the amounts that Jordan has indicated, plus a bit, plus some. We don't know what that sum is, but plus some. And the proposal at this stage from outside, and there's no law and rule and whatever, we're just making a proposal. The proposal from outside is to allocate all of that stuff at the bottom, including to the two FAMPO studies, plus allocating it to, roadways or bike projects or whatever it is that you feel we should be doing. And then when we get the new figures for CMAC and SDGB from Susan, we will then start early on the full process, which you hopefully will adopt and which the policy committee will adopt using the total new methodology. And we're thinking of starting early, like September, October-ish. Start the process. Initiate a call for projects. Have you all submit those projects. Do all the scoring so that we're going to start the next round early and then make those allocations for the following SIP. We can change that, but that's our proposal.
So I guess since there's not very much funding to allocate and we're planning not to allocate the FY28 at this time, I guess, we talked about just basically allocating it basically to existing projects. The exception is basically, so we had previously talked about for active transportation of each locality being able to submit one project for that, and those projects are lower cost, so maybe if you get a couple $100,000, it could actually make a difference. Whereas I know that we talked about some of the big roadway projects and transit projects, a couple $100,000 doesn't really make a difference. So
that's our suggestion. Our suggestion is that we use what's there that needs to be allocated now because it's accumulating, and we want to allocate that, and then use that to fill up existing projects, or as you put it, a bike or ped project, so that we can get stuff that's already in process kind of closer to the mark of getting finalized and built. So we don't like to have that money hanging around too much longer. The HIP funding, for example, it's $500,000, I think, that is just, we decided not to allocate it last year because we were concerned about the process. Hopefully now we've fixed that. The money's available. We look to you guys to decide how to do that.
Do you anticipate this happening every year where we hold off for a couple cycles and then, go and there's a bigger pot of money to disperse, or is this just happening this year because of the unique circumstances of the funding streams?
We think that this is a unique set of circumstances. First of all, we had to redo the whole selection process, which we still haven't actually adopted. We're hoping that we get somewhere today with it. And that leaves us with a much shorter time to be able to score projects. And if we use the full methodology, we could get 30, I don't know, the total number is 35 projects that we have to then score. There's a lot of data analysis because this process is trying to tighten up the loopholes that were there. So it involves lots more data analysis and work to get a really good process. It is a good process, I think, Mr. Chair, based on what all the input has been. But if we get the full list of projects, it take us quite a long time to do all that work. And we also FAMPO had 2 senior staff leave So we were a little short-staffed, so we thought, let's allocate money that's you know, more urgent, can I say, and do that process. But from here on, we'll follow annually a cycle based on the new methodology, and we'll just do it rollover every year. We'll do a cycle as the money gets indicated by VDOT. We will then go through the process and make the allocation with the scoring.
Okay.
So it's just a unique situation that we're in right now.
And you're thinking that October, September timeframe each year would be when the intake would start?
We would start the
for
process.
2019. Okay.
Yeah. It gives us longer time to find the data, to do the scoring. Last time we had a little bit of a rush job, I must say, and at the end, I don't think anybody was completely happy, and we'd like people to be more happy with the process. So we really would like to build time into it, so that if there's queries, we'll just come back and deal with the queries, right? We don't have to have this pressure where we've got to quickly get it done because VDOT needs a to be it.
Okay.
And this is me. What was not liked about the process? I've been so much going on.
There was some data in the that was too much space to argue all the details in the methodology, and we're trying to now narrow that space so that it's clear before we start how we're going to use the data, which data set we're going to use. If a particular project is on a CMP roadway or next to it or behind it or underneath it or whatever, clarify all that stuff. So there's not a lot of, oh wait, you should not view this particular roadway in that particular way. We're trying to get rid of all the subjectiveness out of the process so that staff don't have to try and interpret. The old system is more than 10 years old, the old process for scoring and all that. And it's really, the reality has moved on. So we felt that and we had a tough deadline last time. In fact, you were pushing me to get the thing done because we had some money that we were going to lose if we didn't allocate it. So we had a really tough deadline. We were using a very old methodology that had big loopholes in that you could argue. And you know, I can understand jurisdictions want to get the best for their area. And so it wasn't a good process. So the idea was to try and close the loopholes, to not have these crazy deadlines, and do a good process that everyone's happy with, that they can see how it's being done, we can discuss the calculations, etc.
Right, and I like that, you know, where there's not, things are based upon numbers and opinions. My other question is what's built into how much funding is distributed to these projects? Are we building something into that, into the scoring of like how much this project gets over that project, or is it just, is that being built in?
So you've seen the documents, right? So we've separated CMAQ and SDBG now into separate documents.
It's the next agenda item too.
It's the next agenda item. They're capped buildings, so one project, contact all the money, etc. It's all in there.
Yeah, the whole pot is broken down by mode, by percentage, and then from there, there's caps put on how much it costs.
Is it put in there where one project can get both?
Both what? CMAQ and SDBG? Yes, they can, but they're caps. You can't take all the money for one project.
Okay. So if you have, that's one of the ways we've always distributed funding is if a project can take both, we have had that where they would take both, and that way it's, you get bigger bang for your buck, because some projects will only take this, and some projects will only take that, but some projects can take both.
Yeah, and there is a line about if the project is eligible for both, it can be swapped or arranged however necessary.
Okay.
So I did a quick calculation on this figure, the 900 figure. It's going to be $824,000-ish, $824,000 if we remove the regional studies funding, if we allocate that CBG money to those projects. So that would be about the average for that budget.
Jordan, can we just talk a little bit about the next slide?
Yes.
So based on what we're saying, should it really be kind of that we're thinking about allocating just the previous through FY '27, then we're not allocating the FY '28?
Correct. These were just other alternatives. It wasn't a proposed or set in stone.
Okay. And I guess like for the active transportation, we talked about the CMAQ funding. So that would be like previous to FY '27, but I guess for the STBG, I know like active transportation, I think it's only kind of like for North Stafford. Were we thinking just the existing projects for STBG, or what were the staff thoughts on that?
I think we're amenable to what is comparable to the committee. I mean, we just suggested allocating, like we said on the previous slide, with projects that have the near-term deadline, and also projects that either the jurisdictions recommend. And like you said, there's more limitations on how the STBG can be used, like active transportation going solely to Stafford County, or transit agencies that assist Stafford County.
So let's just backtrack and remember that if we follow this approach, the big chunk of money is going to get allocated in the process we're going to start in September. So the small chunk that we have now, we're going to allocate the best way that you think, and following an equitable process, obviously, and following sound principles, we will allocate the small amount in order to, and in our view, the best thing to do is backfill things that we already have so we can get them built, right? Or if it's a bus, order the bus, rather than take such small amounts and try and allocate them to a whole range of new projects. That's the big picture, if you agree. I mean,
so if we're allocating the small amounts, do we need to basically ask kind of the policy committee for a call for projects for the active transportation?
If you want to add new projects like active transportation, then yes, we would need a call for projects. Or would it be one per jurisdiction, or what?
Yeah, my thought is jurisdiction, given that there's only a small amount of funding.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, and then we could do what we usually do for the projects if you feel, or however you want to deal with that. But yes, we would ask for a call for projects for a limited number.
And that's for the 200,000.
Let's go back. So in order to dispense with that in that last line, so we have the FAMPO studies, which are 100 and
the studies that are basically occurring now.
Now, okay. That are in the PAC, we'll take out that STBG perhaps, if the committee is amenable to that, which leaves you with around 800 some odd thousand STBG and HIP funding, including the 500,000 HIP funding. And then you've got the 554 in CMAQ available. So those are the amounts that are available this year, which we would like to allocate. And Paul was saying that would that include active transportation projects, one per jurisdiction, and we're saying yes, we could do one active transportation per jurisdiction, and the rest, use the projects which you already have, which we've already forward, which are already in the PAC, and backfill in an equitable fashion of some kind.
Okay.
And with the active transportation, I believe that just would be for the CMAQ for the 554.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to recap, if you don't mind, so we issue a call for projects and ask the policy committee for a call for projects for the CMAQ previous through FY '27 for one active transportation project per jurisdiction. Then we're going to make a proposal for some of the STBG and HIP for the regional studies, and then we'll use the remaining of that balance to backfill projects that are currently on the list.
So all of your projects that are on the list, we would then find an equitable way to backfill those. And it's a question which we as staff don't have an answer to. Do you want us to ask you to tell us which projects are close to being ready to start? We could fund those, or we could just do it by using, this kind of a scoring methodology, which we're going to approve now anyway, hopefully in the next month. I mean, it's an open question for us to do. We're not, sticking in the mud.
I think part of that answer to that question is based on which fiscal year it's from. So if a project isn't starting until FY '27, it's not going to be feasible to use FY '22 or previous dollars. So I think that's going to be the main point here is the timeline schedule of what the project is currently and the funding and how those align.
So the thought that I have on that is kind of any new project, so, if there are 3 new active transportation projects, those have to be rated. The 2 FAMPO studies would probably have to be rated as well. But for the existing projects that are already rated, I don't think you'd have to score them again.
Correct.
So if, VDOT says Project X needs another $100,000, I don't think you need to re-rate it. And that would help, and then when we initially had this discussion, there was concern with the staffing, that you didn't want to have a lot of extra work. So I guess to the extent we can kind of simplify that process and you don't have a lot of extra work,
Yeah,
I think would be good.
that would work because it's a small number of projects to score, and, I can get Matthew and the staff members to do that scoring. That's quite easy to do. In terms of scoring the 2 studies, the 2 studies are an unusual. The VCR project was scored as 2 the tunnel because we have to remove it from the smart scale round. So it's kind of a hybrid. We have a UPC, we have some money allocated to it already on that before the tunnel, for the bridges, and the city has agreed that we can combine that with the tunnel, allocate that money across the projects and whatever else. So it's a bit awkward to know how to score that one again.
Do we have to score that one again?
And then the East-West study, again, we can score it, but I'm not entirely sure how that will affect the outcome, because that particular study is an all or nothing study. It's like we either fund it fully or we stop it. We can't sort of delay it 2 years and then come, well, we could, I suppose, but that would be a real weird thing to do.
I know in the new methodology, there's scoring for, we kind of separated it out that FAMPO could make a request at any time without scoring itself for FAMPO-related studies, and we'd bring that proposal to the TAC, and you'd approve, then the policy committee would approve. And then for studies that we receive from transit agencies or other, in the jurisdictions, then we'd use the scoring methodology that way. So that's sort of how that's divided. I don't think we need to score necessarily the 2 FAMPO, which is in the agenda. We bring a proposal to you guys and you make the suggestions.
So I guess my thought is kind of like with the East-West study, it's like an administrative step, the scoring. And I guess, this conversation between FAMPO and VDOT staff and Federal Highway maybe as well, but historically, basically with kind of projects, you always have to rate them. If a project has never been rated at all, you're going to have to do that. So that's why I said the East-West study, you need to score. Now, in terms of just whether or not to do the study, I think FAMPO's already committed to it, and it sounds like there's support for the additional funding, so I don't think there's any question about that. I think it's just an administrative checking the box to make sure you do that. So if someone from Federal Highway asks later, you could say, we did do that.
Okay, we'll find a way to score it. There's no problem with that.
Yeah, we'll use the methodology for the studies and just score it that way.
And we can provide that to you all, and we can also include it in the pack for the policy committee. So.
Yeah, and the VCR trail one, I think, again, that's a VDOT FAMPO conversation. If you think you don't have to rate it, that's fine. I was just suggesting you might consider doing that since it maybe has changed a bit.
Right, yeah, it's currently on the list, but like you said, there are some changes, I guess.
We're happy to do scoring if that's what you would like. It's not a problem. It's a small number of projects this time, so we don't have a problem with doing that. It's just, for us, it's a little weird scoring our own projects. It just feels a bit weird.
I would just clarify, Mr. Chair, if I may, if it's required that there's a score attached to it or required for a process to move forward with it. And I don't think you actually have to have a numerical score for it. If Jordan is saying that the process is that you're going to do this with FAMPO projects, which is you're setting aside funding, your FAMPO board has already approved the projects in some capacity. I think we may be set with that. I just don't want to score for the sake of scoring.
Yeah, and again, this is a FAMPO VDOT discussion, but my understanding historically is kind of all projects have to be rated. Even if, FAMPO board says we want to do this study, you still have to rate it.
But rated could be good. It's a good project.
Right, just checking the box. It's not like, we're not going to do the project.
It's good. Send it to us.
Okay.
So we'll work with Stephen and get it somehow.
Do whatever Stephen tells you.
Stephen will do what you tell us.
The rating have to have value.
We'll do whatever you tell us.
All right, so
Just for my summaries they're working. Does the process have to be that we have to score all the studies along with all the projects as we do this? Or, because that's a study, and then y'all submit projects. The county submits projects. So isn't that sort of kind of different, and wouldn't that be scored a little different, and wouldn't that be approved a little bit different? And that's, I guess that's
Yeah,
for me to know.
so that's a great question, and I know in the STBG,
Yeah.
that we talked about that, we were gonna maybe dive into that a little bit more.
See, I think that's a question that I think that we need to ask FHWA, that if it's a study, I don't know if it has to go through the scoring process. I think if a study, then it's approved, yes or no. But if it's a project, it then goes through the scoring. But I think we need to, that's me and my work.
Well, I just
That's me and
briefly
my
said
own world. I think it's something we need to go to ask FHWA if that's how they would like to have it.
We'll happy to leave it, from our side, we're happy to leave it with VDOT, and we'll do whatever the outcome is.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to do, because I think there's a difference between projects and studies.
And I understand the question. I'll just quickly say the existing approved methodology for STBG does have the studies as a separate category, like the rating kind of methodologies. I mean, given that there's nothing new that's been approved yet, that's kind of the law of the land.
Right. I guess, are we doing a self-inflicted wound on ourselves for having to do that, or should we, because, I mean, most of the studies we get approved is approved by the policy committee.
Right.
You know what I mean? So is that something that we need to, I think it's a question that makes sense. You know what?
Yeah, that's probably a good question.
Too much.
Yeah.
You know what? Just ignore me. Call FHWA. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was just, I was thinking, I'm sorry, I have COVID brain.
So I guess the one thing before we move on, and I'll say I want to wait for Ian to come back, but does anyone have any kind of concerns over the approach that we've talked about, or any comments? And this goes to the people online as well.
And concerns about, sorry.
Well, just what we're talking about with the allocation of the previous to the FY27 funding, which basically there would be, okay.
I think your approach is good.
Okay.
I don't have any issues. And if somebody does not need the funding, as a reminder, save the plan, it helps the people that need it. So I think for us jurisdictions, just be mindful of your projects that you got going on, because if you've got something that's time or politically sensitive, please just call each other offline so we can actually move your projects the way we need to. So, and we've had a lot of those conversations already, especially when we talk about active transportation. So if I can, move your project forward to connect to my project 10 years from now, let's just move the project forward.
That's a good point. So I know it's a small amount of funding we're talking about, but it seems like maybe we should take some action on this, and it sounds like we have consensus, so I guess motion to approve. Is there a second?
Just clarify what you're approving.
Yeah.
So for the transportation, we're going to allocate basically the previous FY27 funding, which the estimate for that is the 554.
The CMAQ.
For CMAQ, right? I'll say each locality gets to submit one project for that. We're not allocating the FY28 CMAQ or STBG at this point, and then for the STBG, we're going to allocate the HIP funding and the STBG for previous through FY27. FAMPO staff, we're going to talk to VDOT maybe about what existing projects maybe are more in need of funding, and that funding will be allocated to existing projects in need of the funding.
Great.
And that's what, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm asking too much in it. I've been away too long, haven't I?
No, you're...
It's me.
Terribly.
If we like that.
Feeling the pain, haven't you? So another question,
Yeah.
so if the project is in there and we have the scope one way, but then the locality changes the scope, are y'all gonna fund that too? Or is that gonna be a different type of, that usually?
We've kind of addressed that, I think, in the second
Have
one.
you? Okay. You see where I was going? Okay.
So I think we should move into, once we've done this, into that, because some of those questions are already answered in the scoring methodology.
So, VDOT, you're okay with this? Okay, okay.
So the points that the chairman has just discussed, I think we should decide whether we move with that or not.
Okay, so each jurisdiction submits one active transportation project seeking the 554K in CMAQ, and then whatever is left in the STBG after if we fund these studies, would just be allocated to existing projects in the FAMPO lineup.
Correct.
All right, I'm in agreement with that.
I guess do we include that basically the policy committee would have for projects for the three basically transportation projects?
We'll ask them straight away to do that this month so that it doesn't delay you.
Yep.
That's great, okay. So I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Great.
So then next on the list are the two project selection processes. And the comments that I have are regarding to both. And I want to start with the sort of out of order with the project scoring method. So throwing it back, I think even to November with the subcommittee meeting, we talked about the crash modification factor and the VDOT VJUST tool. So taking a further look into that, staff is proposing that we just remove that measure altogether because the VDOT tool or VDOT VJUST tool only looks at the innovative intersection, and it's a sketch level screening tool that's intended to narrow down the design options based on congestion, safety, and pedestrian accommodations. So you guys are already proposing a finalized sketch and project, so I think that's a little out of order for them to like screen it and see different design options. So that's why we're proposing to remove that. And then again, with the subjectivity of the crash modification factor, picking multiple factors and also just the subjectivity of how many there are. So that's the first one. And this is both for CMAQ and STBG, just to remove that.
We still have the other factors that you have already in the system. So if you, Matthew, just scroll up for that particular criterion.
Crash frequency and crash severity.
So those ones remain. So we're still doing crash data. It's just removing that one. We did investigate this tool, and it seems very difficult to try and fit into this process.
And I think it's just going to be too much for staff and the level of projects we're submitting, and it turns too subjective and creates more confusion than settles. So.
And Jordan and I just had a quick question with regards just to the total kind of points or percentage for safety. Would that stay the same?
Yeah, so the 7.5 and 7.5 is the original, what was originally determined, and those will stay the same. We didn't add anything because we were still unsure about whether we even wanted to use the CMAQ or VJUST tool.
So we didn't give points to the one in red. We were just asked to please investigate it to see what should be added. And we've investigated and we think, no, it shouldn't be added. We should stick with the two that we've got, which are good and easy to understand.
Okay. I'll say that I support that. Does anyone have any concerns? Okay.
Staff supports.
Okay. And then the next thing is we added a section for special call for projects. If you scroll up, actually, Matthew, it's in red, right here. So this was just asked that in case there's a need for a special call for projects, we have to add the TAC and bring it to the policy committee, and that was due to vote because we didn't have that section in there, and that was a request of the committee to add.
So this allows us to do what we're about to do now, which is to do a special call for projects that doesn't follow the full 100% methodology. And if we don't put this in, then, 2 years from now, you could have a big fight, and then we don't have the option in the system. But it would require the TAC to be in agreement on it. It would require the policy committee to be in agreement on it. But it just allows for us to be able to do that when there's a situation like we have now.
And I think that makes sense. I did have one question. I know we talked about kind of minimum amounts needed to allocate funding. Like, do we still have something in CMAQ and STBG for that?
Yeah, you scroll up above this. Keep going up. Keep going up. Right, and the call for project. It's $500,000 for this is a CMAQ, so it's tailored to CMAQ, but $500,000. If we have less than that, we would not do a new call for projects. We'd do a similar thing that we're doing now of just taking the funding and allocating what needs there are based on what's already on the project list.
Okay, and we have something similar to that for STBG?
Yeah, it's the same copy and paste.
Okay.
And then the last thing to discuss was the number of projects, so right here in the middle. We're still discussing the number of applications, if population was necessary to break down the numbers, and then even transit TDM, how many they received. And so staff proposed another alternative to what the chart has, is that jurisdictions will receive 5 applications for CMAQ, 5 for SDBG, and they themselves can determine which modes they want to apply for. And then transit agencies and other organizations will receive 3, and they have to apply for what they're eligible. So based on this chart above this, what they're eligible for, then they can then subdivide their 5 applications.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah.
This is the only item, I think, in this entire 2-pack of processes in the documents that is not 100% agreed at this stage. Sounds to me, having listened to all these committees and subcommittees discussing these things with you all, this is the only thing that's not agreed. And I just want to try and dial down the temperature a little bit on this. Remember, this is not how many projects are going to be funded and how much money is going to go to the projects. This is about how many applications we need to score and put available to receive funding. Not about allocating funding, it's about scoring. So the only limit on this, well, there's actually no limit on how many. You can decide whatever you want. But the only kind of difficulty with this is if you say 10 projects for every jurisdiction, it just creates a lot of admin for the staff, and then we never have that kind of money to fund that number anyway. So this limit relates to keeping the number of projects roughly in proportion to the amount of money we're likely to have available, because otherwise we're going to score projects that we're never going to give money to anyway. So that's the only point of this limit, is to say we're just trying to not have a free flow of 100 projects to have to score. Rather, we're going to score 30 projects. And then the funding gets allocated later based on scoring, based on available funds, based on whatever else. So you can make those numbers any number you like. The only effect is more or less work for staff. That's the only actual effect, because if the money is very defined, money is not infinite, the money is limited. And once you've allocated that money, all those other ones that you score just sit there and don't get any money.
So by my count, the first option, there's 13 potential projects that could come to you in a given call, right? I mean, adding up all those numbers.
For CMAQ, but there's another bunch for SDBG, right. So it's a bigger number in total.
So would option 2, I didn't do the math, but would option 2 reduce that number to less than 13 or increase that number?
It's calculated just 5 plus 3, so it's 5 times 3 is 15.
Okay.
3 times, how many times did I have? 3.
Okay.
3 3 is 9.
More, okay.
Actually more, option 2 actually is more projects.
Okay.
But there's more way for you guys to choose however you.
Yeah, because there's no percentage based on the type of project, roadway versus transit. You removed that.
The budget will stay the same, but it's the number here. So rapid transportation, each jurisdiction would be able to have 2. So this would be 6 total applications for that.
Okay.
So down here, it would still be fast transportation project is 20% of the total budget, and it would just be maybe 20, or 5 applications, maybe 2 applications, maybe 15 if all jurisdictions want active transportation. So that number can float by month.
Just remember, it's times 2, because this is for CMAQ, there's going to be another set for SDBG. So not exactly, but it's roughly times 2. So
it's 5 between the roadway project and the active transportation project.
Yeah.
We never submit that many.
So one thing we had discussed kind of initially is having basically a different number of basically project applications based on the amount of funding that's available. And this is just an example, like if there was something like, let's just say this is what it might be if it was 5 million or less. And if it's over 5 million, then maybe the number of applications is more. But that's the type of issue which would get to the point that Ian raised. And when I say right now, like with 554,000, if we have 24 applications, that just wouldn't make any sense. But if we're allocating, $10 million, then maybe 24 applications does make sense.
So we've already cut that $500,000 that she just showed us on the screen just now. We've already got some limit there to say that we won't do a full call for projects if it's a small amount of money. So we try to get rid of that. This is for if it's over $500,000, we would then have to do this.
And the other thing is if you don't have 5 projects, you don't have to submit. So you could have 5 as a jurisdiction and use 3, 2 for highway and 1 for active transportation. Again, it's up to your discretion.
The city has on recent occasions actually submitted much less than they were entitled to in terms of number of roadway projects. We've got I think the last round we got only transportation didn't get any roadway projects actually. Sometimes jurisdictions don't actually take up their full allocation, and last round the city actually didn't do that.
So just going back to the point though, like if there's, $500,000 and $1, and there's going to be $20 million allocated, it would be the same number of applications, and it doesn't seem like that makes sense. It seems like there should be some sensitivity to the amount of funding that's able to be allocated.
So we can put in a clause that says,
So we can do sort of a combination. We could say like $500,000 and $1 to X amount of dollars. Each jurisdiction gets 3, and each transit agency gets 2. And then for over that X amount, you can increase the number.
Mr. Chair, I just think that's a lot of work. I think what's going to happen is if all of us submit 5 projects and it goes to FAMPO and they see, let's say Tim Baruti sees that Jamie Jackson submitted a project that got 30 out of 100 points, he's going to say, you're an idiot. So I would probably not put that work on staff because I just don't think there's an added value to do it because you're just going to have a bunch of stinky projects. Like if it's $100,000 and you have a $10 million project and it's not a good project, it's just going to look crazy. I just think it's added work, and I don't think we're going to get the value out of that added. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that everyone understands what I'm saying. So basically, what I'm saying is if there's only a small amount of money to be allocated, we shouldn't maybe have as many applications.
But I'm saying people aren't going to apply. If there's $500,000 and you have a project, you are not going to apply for that if you have, like if you do, and I see your score, I'm going to be like, why'd you do that? Or FAMPO staff is going to say you didn't even meet the minimum criteria, and they're not even going to score your project because you don't have what you need for the project.
There wouldn't be anything to prevent somebody from submitting the $10 million project.
Right, but if you're going to submit 2 $10 million projects for $500,000?
Stephen, what is the likelihood that we're going to have a vastly higher amount of money to allocate than the kind of current amount we anticipate this year?
That's a rhetorical question.
Well, that's the point. The point is, it's going to be what have you budgeted for this year as normal without any increase? It's like what?
Total like.
For CMAC, it's $1.6 million. For STVG, it's $2.2 million.
So 1.6 million, and with the new bill, that could go up to maybe 1.8 million or 1.9 million. But we're in a good wicket this year, and with a good wicket, we're still going to be probably under 2 million. So it's kind of likely we're going to get this massive windfall in CMAC and STVG specifically. We might get those HIP funding money, which Susan every now and again, every couple of years, throws at us of, here's a bunch of money. But that doesn't tend to happen with CMAC and STVG.
I mean, I'd rather reduce the project numbers if that's your concern than adjust the amount of funding. Because if your concern is, hey, we're going to submit too many projects, move it down to 4 or move it down to 3, then you would run into that issue and you just don't change anything else. So staff has something consistent to work off of.
So that kind of was the concern that I have. Let's say there's 1.6 million to allocate and 24 applications. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you had like over 5 million, in funding or something, 10 million, then maybe it does make sense.
We could reduce that 5 per jurisdiction to 4 per jurisdiction if that's what you think would be better. I mean, the reason for giving a global figure rather than per funding stream, per mode, is that it allows the jurisdictions to change. If they decide this year we're going to put 4 roadway, next year you want to put 4 active transportation, it allows you to do that. It doesn't like get so restrictive that you can only do 2 in this and 2 in that and 2 in that. It allows it more kind of broadly.
So I guess a question just with the option 2, basically the other organizations or transit agencies?
For this one, yes, but then for STBG, for these studies.
So with option 2, if we were to do something like that, shouldn't just the transit agencies should just be able to submit transit projects or TDM projects?
Yes, based on their eligibility. Matthew, if you could scroll up to the chart on the previous page right here. So it's based on your eligibility. So if your name is here and the eligibility, you can then do your 3 applications based on this chart.
So with the option 2, would we still be kind of allocating the funding into the 65, 15, and 20?
Yeah.
For the different modes, are you talking now?
Yes.
I think yes. Yes, because we haven't removed that or changed that. We've just said that you can...
Yeah, you would just change like this.
You can change your number of projects, but we're not changing the amount of funding allocated to the different modes. We're just allowing you to change the number of projects you submit. We're not changing the allocation percentages at all. We've agreed those. I think everybody's more or less agreed those. This is only about how many projects you're allowed to submit. That's all that this section covers.
Yes, so just talking kind of about that kind of top part of, this, the matrix there at the top for the roadway. So the concern that Spotsylvania has had is basically Stafford and Spotsylvania have, about 5 or over 5 times the population of the city. And we're not asking for 5 times the applications of the city, but we think there should be some sensitivity just to the population of the jurisdiction with the number of applications the jurisdiction gets. And basically what's currently proposed on this, it would be the same. So that's something we still have a significant concern on. We had proposed having, 1 or 2 more, basically as a compromise on that. But I'll say basically if it's equal, we will likely continue to have a concern.
Matthew, can you just enlarge that just slightly more? We don't have it printed out for us. So that's the where our last discussion, and we didn't amend that since the last meeting. That is the alternative that we were left with at the meeting, and there wasn't agreement on increasing for Stafford and Spotsy. So we did nothing. We just left it like that. And then Jordan has looked at an option 2, which is the one we said, which is to just take a total number and allow you to decide how you want to allocate it, and it's 5. So it's if you were going to do this the other way, you would get 2 active transportation projects, and let's say in the case of Spotsylvania, 2 for roadway projects, and then 1 for FAMPO jurisdictions. So
it's still the same number.
It's still the same number, but it does allow some flexibility in terms of, you could still apply for 5 roadway projects, for example.
So with option 2, I'm not against the flexibility. It's, again, just the sticking point of just the number of applications. Fred Transit and the city, they're the same organization.
It's funded
so basically, in option 2, the city would effectively get 8 applications. Stafford would get 5, and Spotsylvania would get 5, and I don't think that that's fair.
So just my point is we're funded differently. So the jurisdictions, as y'all already know, do not take 100% of the cost of your service for Fred today. For capital projects, it's 80%, don't get touched by any of the localities, and for operating costs, it's 50%. So to say that Fred is the same as the city, it's just not. It's not how the funding works. And in the case of the city, as mentioned before, if we don't have a project, and this is shown historically, then we won't submit the project. Now, forget the number of projects. We could submit all 5. Let's say we do that. The problem is for $1 million, that is literally one project, one solid project for all of us. So, I mean, I think I understand that the number and population is important, but when it relates to funding, it's not going to make a difference. You're just adding more. I'm okay with reducing the number of applications. And again, if you submit a stinky project, I just really do think that our leadership is going to say you keep submitting projects that aren't worthy and they're going to show in our scoring. I just think going over the population piece, yes, the city could say, yes, let's just go ahead and do it. But honestly, if the goal, which you mentioned, was to try to reduce the number, that's not meeting that goal. To reduce the number would say, hey, let's agree on roundtable that it's 4 projects and do whatever you want with them. But submitting bad projects is not going to, it's not going to help staff and it's not going to help us as a region. But if it's something that just needs to go to FAMPO policy committee, I'm fine with doing that. But I think staff's goal is to try to get us to not have to let them have that conversation over basically a project.
Yes, and I appreciate that, and this may have to go to FAMPO. I'll say with the number of applications, I think we are in agreement. I think the total number should be reduced. It shouldn't be 24. It should be something less than that. I don't know. I guess I'll throw this out. So basically, let's just say.
Or we can just throw it on the table as a vote, and then that's the recommendation that goes to the FAMPO from TAC. And this proposal wouldn't even go if we do it as a vote.
Well, I guess one question I have with this too is, since we're not allocating the FY28 funding for CMAQ or STBG, what is the rush in trying to basically approve this today? I mean, why couldn't we take a couple more months to hash this out and then get to a point where we're basically unified before it goes to FAMPO?
So we're using some of this methodology in terms of like how the processes are in general. I mean, some of them are reflected in the current methodology. So there's like, I would assume that we would use this scoring methodology to score the active transportation projects that are going to happen in this call for project to eliminate the subjectivity and all the issues that we've had previously. So I think that would be the only rush on trying to approve this if we're going to do a call for project and use the outline and the content there to do this sort of modified call for projects and allocation of funds.
Yeah, Jordan's right. We have to score the projects you've asked us to score.
Isn't this section only relate to how many projects are submitted? The scoring doesn't relate to the section.
Yeah, correct. But you can't legally implement a methodology that's not approved. You have to approve something, otherwise you can't legally do that. In practice, look, this is a political thing as well as being a numbers thing. And the jurisdictions, there are all sorts of political things that have gone on in the past, and I understand all of that. The counter that the city is not making but could make is that last year they actually submitted 0 projects. Only Fred submitted projects. Second, so in practice they don't always use the allocations. And secondly, Fred could argue that they are providing buses to Spotsylvania and Stafford as well. The buses are not only for Fred, for the city's routes, they're also for Stafford and Spotsylvania's routes, for example. And mostly the money that we allocate in these things goes for things like buses, right? Right. And the tower that got built in Stafford and that kind of thing. So I mean, it's a political question as to whether Fred is the city or not the city, and we have views on that, all of us, and they're not all the same view. My view, just for the record, is that Fred should be totally as an independent agency, a regional transit agency, but that doesn't find agreement with everybody. So that's just my personal, private Ian Hollis view. This is not the FAMPO view. But that's a whole different discussion. But, I mean, also the staff are not needing to die in a ditch on this item. The staff will implement whatever you think is appropriate, because this is not about the allocation of funding. This is about the number of projects. So the staff don't have a dog in the fight, really. We'll score as many as you tell us to score. If you want to increase the numbers, it's fine with us.
So is there an option just to approve the active transportation methodology today? So then you would have what you needed to do the scoring?
I would say if we approved the entire document without this one section. That would be preferred. So we could have all the regulations, we could have the maximums, like we're not allocating more than 2 times the budget, things like that. So I'd say everything but this section, then amendment later, I think is the most fitting, but.
What page number is this?
This is page like 7.
So if you want to go that route, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that you approve or not approve, endorse for the policy committee's approval, the whole document except for page 7.
I would just say 3.1.
Section
Yeah.
Page 7 also includes other stuff.
Except for
3.1.2.
3.1.2.
So I guess I did have a question farther down on the CMAQ. I just wanted to go to the GW Rod Connect.
That's like way after all the methodology.
I forget what page it's on.
Yeah, number 4.
3.4.4.
Yeah, number 4. Okay.
So I guess the question I had, so Stafford had basically proposed the 50,000, which we support. We had consensus on that, but also basically on our 4A, it's like maybe a little different than that. So I just wanted to clarify that we're saying basically that GW Ride Connect would get kind of the 50,000 per year, and then I guess we'd also maybe need to talk about what year this starts, and I think we talked about FY28.
FY28?
Well, I mean, with regards just to the funding situation, I mean, there isn't much funding until FY28. If we were to start it earlier.
We have from CMAQ funding for the previous fiscal years, we have the 17,000 from the leased commuter parking space available for each fiscal year, and then 27,000 in FY27. That's back to the chart on the CMAQ SCDG. Yeah, so if you're using CMAQ, it would be 17,000 and without touching the reserve. We'd have to add reserve money to get to the 50 if that's how if we're starting before 28. Or you can say 17 until FY28 or something like that.
So I guess I'll propose this. If the 50 were to start in FY25 and then continue through 28, could you kind of redistribute? I know there's like 125 in FY27 for GW Ride Connect. Redistribute that and they would still end up with more money than they currently have.
They currently have 0, I think, right?
Well, currently I think they have a 125 in FY27.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that would be a question for Kate online if you can hear us.
Kate, are you there? I mean, it sounds feasible to me. I don't know whether.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yep, I'm here.
Did you hear what we just said?
Yeah, you said propose to start in FY25?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be preferable to waiting until FY27 and then having more money available. I think it would be better to have it earlier.
Any views on that? I don't have a problem with that.
So that would be a clarification of 4A, and I guess.
Could you just, sorry, can we just amend the language now so we don't have to drop this?
Well,
so
can I just ask, I mean, this policy is not going to be used until you guys make FY28 allocations, correct?
No, that's not true. We're going to use it to score active transportation projects after the call for projects this year.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, it's 2 separate actions. It's, you know, this section would be for any annual allocation going forward, which I think would be starting with FY28 to Paul's point. But then the TAC could recommend a separate action to reallocate the 125 for FY25, 26, 27, and then this would kick in when you all do the FY28 allocations, if I'm understanding correctly.
So this is a policy document. This is not the actual allocation of money in the spreadsheet. So all we want in this document is what we're going to do policy-wise, and then we can fiddle with a spreadsheet separately, right? So this would say, my understanding is that we're seeking to amend this to say that we get the $50,000 starting in FY25. And then we leave the rest of the language as is. Is that what we're saying?
We can keep the language as is. You guys could say, we want to change a 125 to 50,000 each year, and then we don't have to change the document. And then all of this will just start with the FY28 dollars.
Does this document specify the 125?
No, you guys would have to make that right.
We'd have to do another
Yeah. You would
action.
make a recommendation to
All right,
change that.
that's muddy the waters. This document, does it specify the 125?
So that's the allocation sheet.
That's fine, so forget about the sheet. This document's the one that I want to get approved. So this document needs to say that we're starting the 50K in FY25. Am I correct?
No, I think we'll say this starts the 50K in FY28. We'll take another action and pass a resolution to redistribute the 125 in FY27 to start that in 50,000 in 25, 50,000 26, and then.
So does that not then violate the policy? Because the policy will say it only can start in FY28.
We wouldn't be changing this policy.
We're just
This is Kate.
In action before.
I think what Ian's
go ahead.
saying to say that it starts in FY25 does make sense, and then the reallocation of the 125 is in order to meet the policy. That way it gives, you know, this is basically the reasoning for doing that allocation. Otherwise, you know, it's not necessarily an off-the-top allocation, I think, is the point that Ian's making.
And the point is that if you don't put it in the policy and you then go and do this other thing, which is counter the policy, then somebody could object and say, wait, that's not in the policy. So I'm saying, just add the phrase
Before starting in
starting in
FY25 initial.
FY25, and then you leave it as is. And then we'll worry about shifting the money in the spreadsheet, but not in the policy. This is a policy. This is not a spreadsheet.
And just with the policy, one clarification, I think it should be basically just a request for the $50,000, not like demonstrating additional needs over 50,000. That's kind of the second line, 4A. And in terms of just the threshold of what they would have to produce, I think we were kind of in agreement that we wanted that to be a low threshold, so not to add a lot of additional burden to them.
Are you saying that if they wanted, Paul, just to clarify, are you saying that taking out demonstrating additional needs over 50, if they need more money, is that what that was?
Over 50,000,
Right, so I think it's saying that they need more money, they can ask, or?
So, right, that's what this is saying, but I'm saying basically what kind of, at least in Spotsylvania, we have support for is the 50,000 a year and
no more
than that.
I think that
Kate,
might. Go ahead, Kate, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask, so would GW Ride Connect, I can't remember back to the list of agencies that's able to submit just normal project applications, would GW Ride Connect be eligible to do that above and beyond the 50,000 set aside, or are you saying it would be the 50,000 only and that's it?
He's really saying two different things. He's saying, so we want to allocate 50,000 to them, is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of
And
like
then
off,
if they want more than 50,000, then we want them to demonstrate what they want to use that additional fund for. Is that what I'm hearing?
so this is more like
The way it's written, it doesn't show that. That's what he's saying, is that it's not specific saying 50,000 is gonna be allocated to them. And then if they want more than 50,000, then they'll need to show, they'll have to demonstrate what the additional need will be.
That's exactly what that says.
That's saying they have to demonstrate over, but it's not saying,
Now read.
where's it gonna be the 50,000?
Read 4. Initial 50K set aside for the GW Ride Connect
Oh,
program.
so
You have to include that top piece in there.
Correct.
and then anything over 50, they.
A says if you want more,
Okay, so
then
you
you
have
gotta,
to read 4 and then read 4A. Okay, I'll see.
that's the way it's written now. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, I'm just saying that is what it says. It says you get 50K. If you want more, then there's gotta be some justification. Paul's saying his mandate is to say we can do the 50K. He doesn't have a mandate to suggest there could be additional funding.
Mr. Chair, this is Rod.
You can go ahead, Rodney.
That can submit a project application?
At this time, no, it's not written like that.
Okay, thank you.
Rodney, go ahead.
I guess the question I have too, on that 50K, does that also cover, say, if they don't spend the full 50K in a fiscal year, does that mean the following year we just make them whole at 50,000? They don't get to have a carryover? And the reason I bring that up is I think that was a concern of the policy in the past. There was, balances carried over from year to year that well exceeded, what they were spending. And so that was kind of frowned upon in the past. So I just wanted to make sure, are we saying 50,000 is the total? So say if they only spend 25,000 in a fiscal year, the following fiscal year, we would just add 25,000 to make them 50,000 whole?
This is
So I know
Kate.
that.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Kate.
Let me just say, I agree with what Rodney is saying as far as making sure that there are not large carryover amounts, because that was an issue in the past. I think it might get a little bit complicated just administratively to try to only allocate, what's not left over, because that actually happens before the end of the fiscal year. So we never have those final figures when you guys are making these allocations. So that could be complicated from that perspective. I think it's just something that maybe in general, FAMPO should be keeping an eye on to make sure that projects aren't racking up large balances, which I think is kind of built into the process now in a way that it wasn't before. So I would kind of shy away from calling that out specifically for GW Ride Connect, but maybe just doing that across the board for all projects, which again, I think FAMPO has addressed in recent years.
So this is a thought. What if there was kind of a cap on basically how much could be carried over from one year to the next? Like, let's say it's 25,000, which would be half of that.
Yeah, I mean, it would not be our intention to carry over that much funding unless there was some specific reason for it. For example, you guys have let us carry over funding so that we can do our strategic plan along with, or, in line with the RPT's timeline for that. So I don't know if this is something that should be a part of the policy just in general, that, projects, that previous balances on projects are looked at on an annual basis, and a project could request to retain that funding. Otherwise, the TAC and the policy committee would look at, reverting that funding. I don't know. I think that's what's happening in practice. I don't know if that's in the policy.
Yeah, I would say, since the 4A says the letter must address pending carryovers from the previous year, if we want to add to 4A, just saying it must be approved by TAC and policy committee. That way you have your safeguard of if you just want to give the 50. But if they have to do a study or evaluation or planning, it's going to cost them at least 100. And I think limiting it to 25,000, then without a plan, that may hinder them. But y'all have been around longer than I have, but
The only thing I say is, and we don't look at this, is that we do look at large balances. I know. And I know how much balance they have currently in that line item.
And it's, okay.
And so that's my concern is that we keep building these up and then I have to come in and be the bad guy and say, y'all got to reduce this down. You keep adding money to it and you're not spending it fast enough. I've had to do this before and I will come back and do it again if I have to because that's what my job is.
So the current balance, my understanding is that's the money for the strategic plan, which is starting in this quarter.
I don't get the breakdown of how they plan on using the funds.
Yeah. So
I can just tell you how much is there.
So there is an amount there, and that is set aside for a specific project. It's not for the regular month-to-month use.
But I'm just saying, if we can't keep going back to what we keep doing. Is we keep putting money into these line items, and then we don't get it spent. And then I have to come in and be the bad guy and say, okay, I'm taking all your money, and we're gonna put it somewhere else, because you're not spending enough. But we keep throwing 50,000 in there. So that's the only thing, is my concern is that if we put the 50,000 in there and you don't spend your 50,000, then tell me your plan the next year how you're gonna spend it. And that's what we're gonna hold you to, so we can continue on down the road.
And then we have decreased, because I think it was initially 125,000 to GW Ride Connect in the, CMAQ, STBG process. So we've decreased that amount, so it's not as much going in every year. So it's a decreased number. And like you said, if they don't spend it, then that's up for discussion, but it is already a reduced amount from what we currently have.
This is Kate. I'll just add, in my mind, the 50,000 set aside is for normal operations. So, what I would propose is that GW Ride Connect just build that money into their annual budget, and then, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance like losing a staff member or something like that, that would be budgeted to be spent in the fiscal year. We wouldn't be, kind of racking up that money for a larger expense like a plan. That's something where I would think we should have the ability to apply for that as a specific CMAQ project. But, giving us a couple years lead time will allow us to build in the $50,000 into our, annual operating budget and just use it that way. I do think the problem in the past was that it wasn't programmed that way, and it was a larger amount. It was 125, and I think at one point it was even 250 a year. So a lot of money kind of built up over time, but that would not be our intention moving forward.
So then why not just put in a clause on that line 4, initial 50K set aside for the GW Ride Connect program, providing 70% of the previous year's allocation has been spent. Because that means that if you don't spend your money, you don't get the next 50. Would that be a compromise?
So, my concern with that wording would be if we spend 69%, then do we just not get the 50? I would just be careful about the way the policy is written. And I don't know, again, what the timing is. I guess you guys want to pass this part today, but FAMPO staff is also getting a set aside. So I would kind of encourage more of an across the board policy versus, a specific policy that is only related to the $50,000 GW Ride Connect set aside.
I'm not opposed to that.
Can I
across the board limit of whatever, but the thing is that we've been rehashing these paragraphs for quite some time. And, eventually there are only 4 options, right? And we've got to pick one.
So what if, for number 4, scratch the initial, just say 50,000 set aside for GW Ride Connect program, and then just with the carryover, I'll go back to my idea of just having a cap of 25,000 as the maximum carryover. You can go from one year to the next. I get what Kate says, that you can't spend it down to the nearest dollar, and you just don't know in advance. And I also get what she says of, if this were to pass, then she would have some certainty kind of planning for the future for their 6-year plan. of what their funding for staff would be, and basically of kind of lowering that threshold on what they need to provide the policy committee and the TAC just to justify the $50,000 per year.
Could we have something where it's like, hey, you've got that initial 50,000 set aside, you know, minus any carryover, previous year carryover that hasn't been, you know, programmed or allocated to projects?
That number isn't going to be known until the end of the fiscal year. We're already going to have to make these allocations and decisions prior to that number being known. It's going to be an estimate. It's not going to be a known figure.
That's true.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question for you. Where does the money go that they don't spend over that 25? Let's say they didn't spend any of it. Where does that money go? So if there's $26,000, where does that $1,000?
So it would go to the balance entry for CMAQ.
It'd be able to be reallocated.
And reallocated for other projects based on the prioritization.
But by that time, it's been free. And I would
So
have to
this
take
is-
it right away.
Sorry, Susan.
It's okay.
I was just going to say, you know, I think this is done in general across the board. So it wouldn't just be the annual set aside for GW Ride Connect that would be looked at each year. You're going to be looking at all projects to see what wasn't spent by the end date of the project. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to build into the policy, you know, that process across the board, not just for our program. And maybe it doesn't happen, I don't know what the timing is on it, but maybe it happens at the end of the fiscal year and then that money is reallocated in the next cycle or something like that. But again, I think I understand the intention. I think there's a way to do it across the board that kind of gets at this and all of the other projects.
Yeah, the problem is with the timing. Susan is saying that sometimes that money is for a specific fiscal year, and if we wait until after the end of the financial year of GWRC or FAMPO or whoever else, that money has to be reallocated like immediately. It can't wait for the following year's CMAQ.
So could you put in there, any funding not expended within the year is subject to reallocation? Meaning, if they don't give you a reason why they need to roll it over, if they don't spend their $50K, they only spend $24,000, and they have $26,000 left, but it's a delay in a project of whatever, some sort of study or whatever, then y'all can, the tax can say, we approve that money to carry over. But if they are not able to identify something that is subject to move forward, then the money is pulled from them, and then I can just reallocate it to another project within the year and have it pull out to, so I would allocate it to the very next, within the previous, and then just step it down to where it would then wind up in the outer years. Does that make sense?
So the one question with that, like, let's just
So,
say,
I mean, you would be putting it in there, that you would reallocate it just to, you know, swap money out in the near year and then put it in the out years.
so that's a good thought. I guess my question is, like, let's just say you're doing this in February or March. You don't know how much money GW Ride Connect is going to spend over the course of that
No, but
fiscal
we
year.
don't approve it until almost June. So anything after June 30th, I can pull.
We have a section for unused and, sorry.
So that would be something that would happen
No, that would be,
after
Yeah,
kind of.
I can just do a transfer sheet up on it, and it would just literally just transfer it. It's swapping out funds. Instead of the funds being with funds would then be in previous, and then I would take the funds off the later years. Does that make sense? So it's just, you would fund it earlier on a project. The project would get additional funds, the funds would.
Yeah, I understand that point.
so can you scroll up a little bit to this section heading so everyone can see? So this is shortfalls and unused funding. So we have a less than 10% funding change in a shortfall. You scroll down, there's a more than 10% funding change shortfall. And then we have this paragraph, all these, about the unused funding. So the first line says if there's unused funding on a project that's completed or canceled, you have that time limit. There's a surplus of allocations and the event. We could add something along the lines for all the projects to say, if a certain percent or amount is unused, we reevaluate every year. We can just add that at the bottom because any project could be delayed, a roadway project could be delayed, and you have that amount still rolling over. So as long as you have a reasoning, we can reevaluate every project on the list. I think that's just to say, oh, this project timeline was shifted out into the future years. We could just add a line that says we'll reevaluate any funding from the fiscal year.
I would probably just deal with GW Ride Connect, because I would just say, and the reason why I'm saying that is the roadway projects are going to be a whole nother animal. And what we're talking about now is whether we should extend funding from GW Ride Connect or not. And I understand where Paul's coming from, and I actually understand what you're trying to do, Paul. If there's some sort of combination between what you and Susan said, because I think if they don't spend the 50 and provide justification, just stick it in the pot. I wouldn't even give it a minimum threshold. If you don't have a plan, why even go up to 25,000 and just say sticking it back in the pot to follow this process?
So how about this? The two key institutions which are getting set aside are FAMPO and GWRC, am I right? There are no others that are getting set aside like this. So why don't we just add a sentence at the end of this about what you do with leftover funds that says, at the end of the fiscal year, any annual allocation to GWRC or FAMPO will be reallocated to other projects if it's unspent, okay? Because then you get another 50,000 or another whatever FAMPO gets from the 1st of July for the next financial year, right? Am I right? Yes.
Yes.
So if you don't spend it,
I like that. I would maybe just add that there's a process for FAMPO or GW Ride Connect to request an extension for some reason, but beyond that, I like the idea of, and you might not say GW Ride Connect and FAMPO, you might say any project receiving an annual set aside, which then if you change it in the other section, it meets that, but I think that's a good compromise.
So the wording would be an additional sentence after the end of this, which would say, for any institution that receives an annual set-aside, unspent monies at the end of that year will be reallocated by the TAC to other projects.
For a CMAQ, though, it's just GW Ride Connect. The FAMPO is only under STBG.
Well, we'll do a similar one on the other side. So unless, and I'm adding one clause, unless justifiable grounds are produced for the money to roll over.
I'm in agreement.
Okay? Because I can see this happening to FAMPO as well. You're going to allocate us 100,000, now I might only need 80 because we've got an increase in our CMAQ coming from, in our 5303 coming, or our PL funds coming, right? So I'm totally in agreement with this. We don't want too much money heaping up. We want to be able to pay our staff, pay them what they should be paid, but we don't necessarily need money to heap up there for nothing. So I'm quite happy with that sentence. Does anybody think differently to that?
So can you just kind of repeat sort of what the sentence would be?
So the sentence would read the following. Any what did I call it? Any institution receiving annual allocations via this policy that does not spend the full allocation by the end of the year will have that funding reallocated by the unspent, will have the unspent portion reallocated by the TAC to other projects unless justifiable grounds are produced for the funds to roll over.
And just with that justifiable grounds being produced, what would that mean? Or what would that look like?
Well, that would, I would imagine, need to be a presentation to the TAC and probably to the policy committee saying, and there's a case in point now where funding was allocated to GW Ride Connect for a strategic plan, which has taken a little longer to start than was anticipated, and so that money is heaped up. It is there. The project is being done in this fiscal year, but it was delayed. So because the start of the project was delayed and the money was allocated to a specific project, not just like spend it on whatever, it's still allocated to that specific project, but there is a delay in the implementation of that project. In this case, though, it's annual funding, so it's, I would assume, not going to be allocated to a specific project. But if you say, you know, we had no staff, we had 2 staff members resign, we've now appointed somebody else at a slightly higher salary, we're going to need the money. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do the specifics, but it would be that you would need to demonstrate that there was a very good reason why you didn't spend the money, and that reason has gone away and you're going to need the money. It's going to be unlikely that that's going to happen, right? Usually annual allocations unspent would return.
Mr.
So
Chair.
I think, yes.
This is Kate. I would just maybe revise what Ian said as justifiable need to something like, you know, unless a request by that institution is approved by the policy committee to extend the funding, you know, for some reason or something to that effect, so that it's clear that, you know, upon their approval, it can be extended, you know, as long as that request meets their, whatever their threshold would be to make that decision.
And one clarification, we would want to specify that it's fiscal year, as opposed to kind of annual, kind of.
So you wouldn't know the leftover until the next fiscal year, so you'd reallocate it in the next cycle. That's the.
So you would only know on the 1st of July how much was unspent. So on the 1st of July, you would need to make the determination, but we would probably only reallocate it, well, I don't know. I mean, would we allow Susan to do the fancy footwork and push it to?
Well, that's kind of what she said.
See, you see me doing my fancy footwork that I always do.
So by the end of the fiscal year, it needs to be spent, even though it's not allocated per well.
It is allocated.
It is allocated per fiscal year, correct. So it would be need to be spent within the fiscal year. That makes the most sense.
Like GWRC would not be submitting the remittance for that, you know, for at least a month, just as we close out our fiscal year. So I think we can figure out the procedure separate from the policy, but just any funding that's not spent with, you know, by the end of the fiscal year, basically, even if it's not remitted yet, at some point after June 30th, it probably wouldn't happen until, you know, the next quarter or something like that. It would be looked at and reallocated in the next cycle, as Jordan.
Know in the next FY funding cycle. So that would be an available balance to reallocate. We would know that at the time of the next cycle. So you'd go through a cycle once without knowing what the balance is. Then the next cycle that would be implemented. So there's going to be one off season.
I agree we shouldn't put all the administrative procedures in the policy because that would make it cumbersome. But we do want to say that it must be spent within the fiscal year, and then we leave it up to the administration to produce the financial statements and produce the, you know, the spending for the year. It might take a month or two after the 1st of July to physically produce the paper, but you know, within a reason, obviously. The administrative procedures of doing that, it could be tabled at the TAC within, say, 2 months or something, but let's not write all of those dates in because that'll become. But it must be spent within the fiscal year. Does anybody not like that language? Happy?
Yes. I think that kind of addresses the concern.
Okay, move on. I'm just worried about your timing. I know.
These are all the things that we've brought up and we've addressed. So based on the conversation, it would be the removal of the crash modification factor and the VDOT V-just measure, the addition of a special call for projects section, the addition of the language that we just determined for investigating and reallocating the annual set-asides if they're not used in the fiscal year that they were allocated, and then to delay the decision on number of applications per jurisdiction agency and endorse the document otherwise.
Yeah, so we're basically trying to approve everything other than the section 3.1.2.
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or concerns? Okay. So do we just want to move to kind of the action item, basically with the resolution with the modification that it does not include section 3.1.2?
Matt, enlarge it a little, please.
It's just the resolution.
And this is a resolution that the
And this
policy...
would be edited to not include that one.
This is for the policy committee to approve, not...
It's just a draft.
Okay. We're just looking for an endorsement of the policy, not a...
With the modification.
Okay. So basically, the changes would be kind of the ones we talked today, the crash modification factor taken out, the changes for GW Ride Connect, and the fact that basically we don't have consensus on section 3.1.2, so we're not basically concurrent on that at this point in time. So do you want us to take an action?
Yeah, just do you endorse the thing?
Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Great, thank you, everybody. Next one.
And then it's the same thing for STVG, all the same thing. I would just include the same language, same modifications, and then the resolution as we adjusted. Unless there's any other concerns.
Do we have to talk about the studies? Well, I know we had some kind of...
Sorry?
I got to turn in like to the staff, and I know VDOT brought this up, but...
Just pull up that one page in the text on studies. We will carry over, Mr. Chair, if you're happy, we'll carry over the 4 changes into this document as well as appropriate.
Yes.
And then...
It's the scoring methodology. Yeah, this is the scoring methodology currently listed for the study.
Just make it larger, please, Matt, at the back of the room here, it's harder to see.
It cuts off the rest of it, but yeah.
And then we have the one caveat of would bring the TAC a letter or presentation for their studies so they wouldn't score themselves. And then, like you said, we're working that out with VDOT to figure out the exact logistics of providing a number value.
So just going back to the studies for FAMPO, like the way this is currently, it would be 5% of what the STBG total would be after the contingency is taken out?
Correct.
Yes. And did you not also have a sentence for one-off request, or is that built into the...
Yeah, so if you actually scroll up to like the same sort of chart we were looking at earlier, it's like
like the particular study we have now.
One more.
Yeah. It's a one-off request.
So I guess like with the studies, and I guess maybe 2 applications is fine, but I guess the intent in my previous comments was not to limit the FAMPO staff and like how they would use that money for studies. So I'm not sure that you need to have like an application kind of limit on that, but the thought that would be kind of a set aside for FAMPO studies. And then as needs come up, there's a freight study or whatever you need to do, you would have access to those funds for that.
I understand. Can you point to the paragraph where we could change that or should change that?
Well, I was looking at, I guess, table 3.1.2, I guess.
3.1.2.
Does that kind of apply to paragraph?
So the numbers, where it says 2, you think we should change that to?
Just to a dash, because we automatically are gonna get the 5%, we don't need to compete against.
Yeah, I was thinking like there's not an application limit. Basically, that's kind of set aside for kind of FAMPO regional studies, basically.
Correct.
Yeah, and you don't have like an application limit. Like you wouldn't have to submit an application for that. You could just basically, the policy committee and TAC have to approve whatever the study is, but you could just go and do that.
So I suggest we just take out that 2 and put a dash or say the word any or something. It's not a number. I agree.
And I guess I'll just say for the other studies, that number probably should maybe be 1 instead of 2. I think 2 is just too high of a number. I mean, you'll basically get kind of 6 times 2, you could get 12 study requests for a very small amount of money.
FAMPO jurisdictions and the transit agencies. So 1 per annum is what you're saying per agency.
Yes. And I'll say just with the money kind of available, you know, so people would know, basically it's about 1.8 million. So 5% of that is around 90,000.
Yeah, not
a lot of money. Yeah, that might go up a little in the future, but it's not a lot of money.
I agree. Unless the transit agencies feel strongly that if you've got 90 or 100,000.
Y'all have worn me out. No, I agree. We'll find.
We have other money.
Change that to 1 each and change the bottom one to dash. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Studies. So I guess, was there anything else in the studies? I know
I'm good.
Good, okay.
Lunchtime is coming. I'm just teasing you all.
I'm good.
So, and on this one, we have a similar concern basically with the CMAC, and I guess just to explain, it's possible basically with FAMPO, it may be a full TMA in the future, so kind of the STBG would not just be kind of primarily kind of focused on North Stafford. And it's the same comment, basically just as with the CMAC, we think kind of the number of applications should be sensitive to the jurisdiction population. So this, we would have a similar comment to the CMAC. Table 3.1.2.
So should we just do the same process that we did for CMAC, table this one section, 3.1.2 for further discussion, and adopt the rest of the document with those amendments that you just indicated?
Yes, and with the other changes, I know the crash modification factor was on that. Were there any other changes?
Crash modification factor, VJust tool, the addition of the special call for action, and addition of the language that Ian mentioned in the CMAC, similar to the FAMPO staff with the set aside for the studies.
Yeah, so that's like on 4A. So it'd be similar to what we talked about with the GW Rod Connect?
Yeah, so it'd be similar. We'll add that language to the very last section, unused funding, same wording.
Okay.
And then the change of these two for the next time we have a discussion about it, and then this will still be on hold.
Yeah,
Change
so
of
that 3.1.2 will still be on hold, but the rest we would approve today so that we can do this.
Okay.
Cool. I guess you can put those numbers then under studies in black.
Correct, yep.
Those two under black.
Now, I'd say with the STBG, we're not actually doing a call for projects, though. We're just allocating the existing funds, right?
Yeah.
So we're still going to use the cap and the same implementation of the features.
Yeah.
The cap for projects.
Okay, well, I'll motion to approve basically the STBG with the caveat that basically table 3.1.2 not be included at that and be decided at a future date by the policy committee.
Correct.
Similar to the CMAC.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good.
Thanks, everybody.
Sure. Okay, we're down to number 7C, the regional studies, the interregional multimodal east-west mobility study, and the preliminary engineering for the VCR Trail Tunnel Bridge Crossing Study.
Ian, can I ask a quick question before we start? Sorry. Will we lose quorum if I leave? I have an obligation that I have to get back up north for, and I know we're kind of like quorum, so I just want to make sure I'm not going to throw you for a loop.
Going to, because Susan is not a pledging member.
Okay.
Unless Susan stands in as an alternate for Michelle, but she's not currently an alternate.
I think, I mean, in light of that, I can probably miss what I have going up there, but I wanted to make sure, so I'll stick with that.
We can just be quick about
Yeah.
stuff. Yes, make it quick.
I'm really sorry, I just.
Then to that point, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'll give you the very quick explanation of this. For the FAMPO study, I took the three chairs of the TAC into my confidence and asked them to help me just go through the process of looking at the costing and the consultants that we were considering using. And I think the four of us, the three chairs of the TAC and myself, generally reached consensus that the process to go is to pick this particular consultant, to ask them to do a detailed task order, and we ended up getting the price down from where it was originally, and I think it's less than what we anticipated having to spend on it. The VCR trail study, there was a PE study in the CMAQ SDBG allocations from last round for some money to do the two bridges, to design or do some engineering work on the two bridges. It was regarding the tunnel project, or the, should I call it rather, the method of connecting the two sides, the two halves of the VCR trail over or around the I-95. That had been submitted as part of two smart scale applications for this round. However, VDOT indicated that they're not properly scoped. We don't have any drawings, we don't have quantities, we don't know the cost, and that some further work would be done. We then had a discussion with the two jurisdictions and agreed that we would take the two bridges and the UPC we already have and add a potential tunnel to that project, get a costing, see how much that would cost. I went to two consultants, got them both to express their costing and what would be involved. We've taken the expensive of those two and asked them to prepare a task order, which is in your pack, I believe, as well. And so you have these two, the phase 2 of the East-West study and the VCR trail PE engineering work as two projects. We have, in both cases, a chunk of funding already allocated, if you can just go to the next slide. So there's the costing of the two, $301,000 for the East-West study, $107,000 for the VCR trail project. Below that, we put the funding that's already approved in inverted commas, because we don't physically have the money in our hands, but it was allocated. The $40,000 5307 funding that the GWRC allocated to the project, and the 125 HIP funding that the TAC and the Policy Committee allocated to the project, and the 5 historically allocated funding to the Bridges project. Next slide. And there is the shortfall, 1.6 for the one and 30 for the other one, and we suggested that we could either use previous funding from other studies and projects like the Lafayette study. We could use HIP funding, depending on how much it is, or unallocated SCBG funding that is available. And we're asking for the TAC to recommend funding to complete those two projects. We do think it's value for money. That's all I need to say. I think I'm happy to take any questions.
So I said that we support funding both studies, and I guess my thought is maybe the HIP funding would make the most sense, since that needs to be spent first. I guess I would defer to VDOT if you have different thoughts.
Okay. Can we just ask for clarification from Susan that we can spend HIP funding on both of those projects? There's not a technical reason why it's not allowed. They're both studies.
I can send you what was said from such laws, and it said that HIP funding can be used just like any sort of SDBG.
What studies?
I will double check. I'll find that email right now for you and send it to you.
Thank you. If it says studies, then I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I've got one question. Can we go back one slide?
Yes.
All right, so for the East-West, we've got the 59,000 plus 40 plus another 125?
That's for phase.
That's our phase.
Phase 1 was funded completely from a DRPT grant, plus FAMPO used our 5303 funding, which is our annual allocation that we use anyway to pay staff. So it's not new money.
Okay.
The 59 was new money we managed to get from DRPT to fund phase 1, which deals with transit, bike, ped, etc. We got that funding, and we've used that funding. We're currently still using it. and then the 40 is for phase 2, and the 125 is for phase 2, which is going to start, and the consultant will do phase 2 because we need engineering, we need drawings done, we need all that stuff.
All right, Mr. Chair, I recommend that we move approval of funding the study in the order of TIP funding first, as you recommended, and the Lafayette Boulevard, if applicable, just in case they can't spend the HIP funding, and then the remaining balance will be STBG in that order.
And I'll second that. Any further discussion? Motion to approve? All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right.
Great, the next item is for me, the LRTP, and
Wait, you need to, the endorse.
I beg your pardon, endorse the 2217.
22, we just did 2217.
Okay, yes, you could endorse the resolutions, and in the interest of time, unless somebody has a problem with one of them, I suggest you just take all 4 and ask for endorsement of all 4.
Yeah, so I guess I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2218, 2219, and 2220, since we already approved 2217.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Okay. We're down to 7D, LRTP.
Thank you. I'm going to stand over here to just make it quicker. The LRTP, I have to tell you, is finally done. Can I hear a... Yay! It is currently roughly around 700 pages. So if you want to know what the FAMPO staff have been doing for the last year, 2 years, it's done. We've loaded it onto the website as PDFs over there so you can read it, and we've done the chapters separately so that if you have download problems, it's a smaller document to download. The only part that is not there is the CMP, the congestion management process. And the reason for that is that we're just not completely happy with the text. We're still tweaking it. We will get it to you by next TAC meeting. But the rest of it is all there. This is the CMP over here. So the rest of it is there. Obviously, you don't have the public comments because we haven't had public comment yet. But all of it is there for you to look at. And we've hidden 2 typos in it just to see if you actually need to know. I'll give you a clue. One of the typos is in chapter 1. Okay, so there it is. We're not asking for you to approve it or anything like that today, obviously. This is the first time we've actually tabled it. You're the first people to see it. We invite you to read through it at your leisure. We're going to ask the policy committee to approve it for public comment. So then there'll still be a further month for people to read it all again and give further comments again. We have put the gas on getting this thing done because we know that by March, April, we need an approved CLRP with some new projects which some of you all want to apply for funding for. So we put the pressure on to get this done. It is done. We've got all of the bits that we need from the feds. We've got letters, as you can see in your pack, saying that we've got the federal highways and federal transit together with the environmental regulator approval for the CLRP. So we're very happy that they're very happy and we can actually proceed. So that's in your pack as well. We invite you to read it. We invite you to circulate it to whomever in your jurisdictions and agencies you think should have read it and give input. We will happily receive inputs from you all. I'm going to allocate 1 staff member, and I'll let you know via email who will receive comments that you wish to make and edits and corrections and all that kind of thing. So we just have 1 person collecting those comments in one place, and we will keep all of those to be submitted later. And that's all that I want to tell you. I don't want to get into the detail of it because it is 700 pages, and I'm sure you don't want my summary.
So Ian, just a quick question, like if we have comments on it, is there a deadline for us to submit those to you?
Right now, we don't have a deadline because remember the public participation process is only going to begin the day after the policy committee. So then there's going to be a 30-day comment period. So by the end of that 30-day comment period, if you could give us comments. So you've got the rest of this month, probably the whole month of February. So let's say by the last day of February, if you could give us your comments. Great.
February 23rd. 21st is when the policy meets again and would approve.
So February the 21st.
Or no, that's the holiday, so the 28th, or is it?
The holiday?
Do they have the holiday?
Yeah, the 21st.
Yeah, the 21st.
Let's just say by the February Policy Committee meeting. What is the date of that? It's in the calendar, which you've attached, I think, to this.
We can pull it up, but yeah, I think it's the 21st.
So by that Policy Committee meeting, if we can get the comment, remembering that we...
It is a holiday, okay.
Yeah, the 28th is when we need all comments.
Just leave this calendar here, please. So we've got the remainder of January, we've got most of February. We would only be approving the LRTP in March, not in February. We don't need to approve.
We're good, we just need comments.
We don't, yes. Yeah. So by the end of February, if you could give us your comments.
Then we can incorporate to bring back the final.
So yes, because we'll bring you in March, at the TAC meeting in March, the edited, amended, fixed, corrected version. So if by the end of February, you give us your comments, in March we will bring you the corrections, and then the policy committee in March can adopt it, and then you've got your approved LRTP with the CLRP for your project. We're assuming that we don't have to use April. April's injury time. We can delay it by another month if we have to, but I'm trying to avoid using that. That's my safeguard. If everything goes wrong, we've got the month of April as a safeguard. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2221, directing public comment period for the draft 2050 LRTP. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
For the CMP update, all I need to tell you is what I've told you, that it's in process. I've got a staff member here working on it as we speak. We hope to finish it in the next week, maybe 2 weeks, and then it'll be in your next tab.
Can we go, Nick? Can we go over this one?
Okay.
Before we lose, quickly?
Yeah, so it's just, we're adding 2 new projects, the East-West Study and the VCR Trail, and then Fred has 8 projects they're adding. It's actually 7 because one of them, funding sources, doesn't need to be in the TIP-STIP, so that's going to be an adjustment that we make for the final policy committee. It is going to be the first one that is in the Fred. It's like FTR0016 is the one that's going to be removed and the final version for the policy committee. But otherwise, it's just as is normal.
So I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2222. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you. Whatever you want.
You know, I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry.
The last one is the state safety targets. FAMPO is endorsing and approving the state targets. We're not creating our own targets. This is just a letter that we have to send. So if you just take action, it's not a resolution, but just action.
The action is direct back to send it.
It's direct to the policy committee, and then Ian will sign it and send it.
So then the policy committee will officially approve it. We just need you to endorse it so we can send it to the policy committee.
Yes, correct.
So just one question, like this doesn't come from the FAMPO chair?
Last year it was signed by Ian, so I just copied the same system that was done last year.
Okay. I mean, you can ask the FAMPO chair to sign it. I have no problem with that. It's just.
And I guess I was just curious because typically you send a letter to the state. That's, yeah, what's done. But
last year I signed it, but last year I just arrived here and they shoved it into my face and said, I'm here.
And you did it.
This year we can change that. I have no problem.
Well, I'll say I'll make a motion to approve with that one change.
That's fine.
All right.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes.
Now we're literally done for.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry about that.
Correspondence. So there's the letter, which is a really nice letter. We like receiving letters like this. This is our conformity finding, and joint, scroll down. It's a joint finding.
Take care, thanks.
FDA and FHWA.
FHWA, FTA, completed a joint review, and they refer also to the EPA, and input from FAMPO FHWA. Find that the determination of for the Fredericksburg area demonstrates conformity as prescribed by the EPA. So there's the key sentence. We have our official approval, which we're very happy about.
That's great news, and I just want to give a shout out to VDOT and FAMPO for all their work with us. I know it's very important.
Yeah, and there's the EPA letter as well, so thanks, everybody, and thanks to the staff. I just also want to thank the staff for all their work on the LRTP. We did it under a little pressure this time because of the deadlines and the CLRP needing to be approved, so my thanks to the staff who have all worked terribly hard, and the staff members who are no longer with us, they did incredibly hard work on this as well. I just want to thank all of them. I think it's a great job. Next.
Staff reports, there's just a few small things. Smart Bill technical guidance is out. I have a link in here. There's a couple more smart projects that got funded in the city as well as Onville Road. Virginia Transit Equity Modernization Study, and then the FY22 meeting calendar that was previously mentioned. That's it.
And the discussion for the calendar is the September TAC meeting falls on the holiday, so we need to decide a date for the September TAC meeting.
Can you just blow up September?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see it from this distance. Okay.
Typically have it on the 5th, but that's the holiday.
Could we do the following Monday on the 12th?
Yeah.
Does anyone have a concern with that? Okay. Why don't we make that change?
Perfect.
That's it.
Great. So member reports, we'll start with Stafford.
Nothing to report this time.
Okay. VDOT?
Sure.
CTV is getting the TAC projects that were submitted. They'll be submitted to the CTV today and tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
So, after that, we will meet with the CTV member and figure out how he would like to distribute the funding on the project.
And is that for the additional kind of, no, that's not the Smart Scale project, that's the TAP project.
Just the TAP.
Okay, just the TAP, okay.
Just the TAP project.
Okay, sounds good. I guess I just had a VDOT question on the Smart Scale. With the regional projects, I know there were some questions those that VDOT had on like the pre-applications, like will VDOT be following up with FAMPO and the localities on that soon?
Anything that we've not already communicated about individually, yeah, we've got a lot of communication underway, but obviously isn't
right.
Certainly within the next several weeks, we should have all that done.
And the pre-application period for Smart Scale still starting in March?
The deadline is April 1st.
It starts in March. I mean, it's already started. Could we do something today, or?
I don't think you can put a gap in today.
Okay.
Try.
Okay, sounds good.
I like to think you're that far ahead to see what happens.
Sounds good. City?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Anyone online with any comments? Spotsylvania has none. So thank you all for attending.
Chairman, if I could just make one concluding comment. Sorry about that.
Sure.
Folks, just a comment from me. We're in a period now when COVID is going through the roof, the infection rates, and we're having these severe weather events. And what this is going to mean for us is that we're going to have problems getting a quorum in person at our meeting. So I'm just requesting all of our members of the TAC, and I'm going to ask the same thing of the policy committee. If you are unable to attend because you've been exposed to COVID or because you're stuck, your car's stuck because of the clement weather or whatever, I'm requesting you please to contact your alternate and make sure that they are available to come. Obviously inform us, hey, I can't attend. But when you do that, please say, I can't attend, and I called Susan and asked her to stand in for me, so that I've got an official record that that alternate is your replacement, so that when we have a quorum, it's okay at the TAC if we only have 6. But if we have 5, then the meeting is abandoned and we wasted our time. So please do call your alternate when you can't make it. I know sometimes there's going to be this case. I was exposed to someone who had COVID. I can't come. It's fine. We don't expect you to come.
We don't want you to come.
We don't want you to come, correct. If you've been exposed, stay home. But please do call your alternate, because if they're not exposed and they are available, we'd like them so we can keep the quorum so that we don't get bogged down, because I think it's going to happen. I think we're heading into the next 2 months. One or other committee is going to collapse because we don't have a quorum. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. A motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
all your hard work.
I sent you the